Hello, and welcome back to this Cacao podcast series. I want to take you on this journey with me of learning about this plant medicine, how it has traveled across the globe, literally, etymologically with our language, just all these different ways, and how this plant, this form of nourishment, can transform us in more ways than one, not just by consumption, by drinking, but through observation, through mindfulness, reflection, embodiment. So this is episode 2, and I should warn you, I do not edit these, my podcast in general, but I don't edit this podcast either, this series. I like to keep things raw, rugged, as organic, natural as I can, and hopefully you can feel the ambience, the environment that I'm in as I record, so it feels like you're here with me. And you will definitely hear the wind rustling in the trees, maybe my footsteps on the grass, on the rocks, on the trail that I'm walking. Hopefully you can hear me well. I'm keeping my mic close, but just wanted to let you know. So let's begin. This episode is all about cacao. It's all about the word and the plant as we know it, cacao, and its journey. And I've been sitting with this word, cacao, because I keep coming back to this, amazing fact that it has survived civilizations. Thousands and thousands of years ago, it has survived different languages, transformation, literally being processed in different ways, and depending on how it's processed, a different product, either chocolate or cacao, still remains cacao, or it becomes chocolate. And I've been sitting with this, the word, the plant, all of it, because it shows the journey, the larger journey, and then the smaller little journeys about our world. And I think the nature of so many things, nutrition and business, and what does it look like to be transformed? What does it look and feel like to change over time? Maybe not for the better, maybe for the better, all these sorts of things. So I want to start at the beginning, that the cacao tree is actually native to South America. I think that so much of society, so much of culture as we know it, assumes and describes, it just points to the fact that in Central America, in the countries that are now known as Mexico, Guatemala, and Salvador, perhaps parts of Honduras, that these countries, back in the day, where the indigenous, such as the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Olmecs, that they used cacao. It was a ceremonial thing, it was a ritual thing, it was a big part of their society and culture. And that is true, but if we go even further than that, we see that the cacao tree is actually native, born from the land, the soil of South America, specifically Ecuador. and northern Peru, the Amazon basin, parts of the Amazon. And so earliest evidence shows that about 7,500 years ago, people were working on this plant, with this plant medicine. And if we just sit with that for a moment, that almost 8,000 years have gone by, and this plant has transformed and been used in so many different ways, and has traveled the globe and continues to travel the globe. And its roots have either not been fully acknowledged, fully honored and supported, but also just forgotten. I didn't know. As someone who is getting into cacao batching and making blends with cacao, I didn't know that its roots were in South America. So understanding and learning about the nature of a thing and where it comes from, and even ourselves, where we come from, where our families and the ideas we have and the feelings and the values. So I want you to just sit with that. I'm not trying to define anything necessarily, but we're just going on this journey. So most of the story that we know is the Mesoamerican story. And that's where this plant became something beyond food. It wasn't just physical sustenance. It was sacred. And the first evidence that we have are the Olmecs, O-L-M-E-C. And they lived along the Gulf Coast of what is now known as the southeastern part of Mexico, roughly 1,900 BCE to 300 BCE before Christ. And what's interesting about what the archaeologists have found are the ceramic vessels around the Olmec sites that still have residue in them. And the residue is, I might mispronounce this, you all, theobromine residue. And theobromine is a compound, is something that comes from cacao. And that is in and of itself amazing, that I can't even do math, but 7,000 however many years from now to 1,900 BCE, and we're still able to see the depth, the traces, the deep traces of cacao in this culture, in these people. And so the Olmec were working with cacao, drinking it, consuming it, preparing it in different ways, but also in ritual contexts. And they did not use the word cacao. They used cacawa. So it is spelled K-A-K-A-W-A. And linguists have traced that word to the Mexic-Zoquian language family, which is believed to be the language that the Olmecs spoke. So even we're seeing now the transformation, the change, the journey. The plant itself has sustained over almost 8,000, close to 8,000 years in terms of how it's prepared, how it's sustained, all of that, but also in the word itself, how we even speak about it has changed linguistically. So now we get into the Mayans. And the Mayans inherited the plant and the word. And so they learned from tradition, they continued on the tradition. And for the Mayan, it was a whole other level. It wasn't food, it wasn't just food, I should say. It wasn't just a drink. it wasn't just anything. It was in their sacred texts, one of the, or I think the only, don't quote me on that, sacred text, the Popol Vuh, Popolvuh, one of the oldest surviving sacred texts from the Maya. In that book, it's shown that the cacao and maize are directly related to what they call the sustenance mountain. So the mythical source of life itself. This, these two plants, these two pieces of medicine, these two pieces of divinity come directly from the source, from where all things create. So now we're talking about a plant that is like nectar of the gods, so to speak, is coming directly from this cosmology, this origin of the world. And so the Mayans wrote about it. And they developed one of the fully written languages in the ancient Americas. And Americas, just for a quick history lesson, is not just America. It's Americas, plural, North, South, and Central. And cacao, or cacawa, appeared on their stone mountains. They wrote about it on their monuments, on their vessels, on their objects placed inside tombs. And so it was something that I would say akin to maybe what the pharaohs and the ancient Egyptians, they would put their most precious, most sacred and divine objects with them to take them with them in the afterlife. And so the Mayans had something very similar with cacao. And I think about that. I think about what it means to hold something so sacred, to hold something so in the most high regard, that it is the deepest level of nourishment physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that it transcends time and transcends what we can see, feel, hear, touch, taste. It's remarkable because I don't see anything like that nowadays. I don't think that we have anything like that in our current 21st century. I'm recording this in 2026. So the fact that the Maya used this in so many ways, as a tomb material, they used it in marriage ceremonies, coming of age rituals, offerings to the gods. It was currency in some contexts. It was medicine. They had so many different relationships with this plant, with this medicine. And this is something that I really have deep love for. From my understanding about most of indigenous cultures, is this relationship to the plant, to other animals, to other beings and things and experiences and environments. There's a relationship. And just sitting with that for a little bit. What relationships are serving us? And this is not just relationships with people, although it is about that. It's relationship with plants. Are we having relationships with plants? Do we need to? Do we need to define and develop and strengthen them even more? Absolutely. Relationships with other animals, because we are animals. Relationships with the air and the sun and getting vitamin D, but not just to receive something, but also to be in its presence and be in our own presence. So just sitting with that. So continuing on this journey, Now we go to the Aztec, otherwise known as the Mexica, the Mexica. And they have their own relationship and their own cosmology around cacao. In Aztec tradition, the god Quetzalcoatl, I probably did not pronounce that, and that god is often associated with bringing cacao to humanity as a gift, which again brings this other layer that this is something to receive. This plant and this medicine and this treat and this luxury and whatever else we want to describe it as is something to be received, to be appreciated. The Aztecs called it cacahuatl, Cacahuatl. So it's cacao plus alt, which in their indigenous language called Nahuatl means water or liquid. So thinking that it means water and knowing that our human bodies are made of, I don't know the statistic correctly, if it's 70% or close to 80% water, but just thinking that they, from my understanding, from how I've Googled and researched this word, their definition is associating cacao with water, this non-negotiable essential drink that sustains us and sustains all life. Again, shows this very omnipresent, or maybe not omnipresent, but just this fully layered, the word that comes to me is multiverse. Maybe not omnipresent, but just this very well-rounded, very above it all, but within everything and surrounding everything. It's just this god-like, goddess-like, divine substance. And regular people were not drinking this at the time of the Aztec. It was something for the elite. It was reserved for rulers, warriors, priests. It was sometimes mixed with chili or vanilla. Hint, hint, my ancestral blend that is just with vanilla and guajillo pepper. And it was poured from a height after it was mixed with the other chili or vanilla or flowers. It was poured from such a height to build foam because they didn't have frothers. But even they knew to respect the foam and develop a foam. And the beans, the cacao beans themselves, were currency. So there are records of how much a tamale, and a tamale is a type of, I don't know if people would call it a street food. I don't know if I would call it a street food, but it's made of corn. Different countries all over Latin America make it in different ways, but it's essentially kind of the size of your hand, the full size of your hand. And it can either be sweet, so sweet corn, and then it can, you can eat it with a cream. In El Salvador, where my family is from, they'll eat it with a special type of cream and cheese, and they'll eat that for breakfast sometimes. But there are also tamales that are very savory, and you can put with chicken, other sort of ingredients. Every country does it differently. But so let the records show, is what I'm saying. I digress. And let the records show that a tamale was worth a few cacao beans. And a turkey was worth more, even more cacao beans, because turkeys were expensive. And so cacao beans were so valuable that they were counterfeited. Can you believe people would fake cacao beans? They would make fake cacao beans. So it's just wild to think that the not even just this one plant, right? But so many other plants and that I don't want to say we take for granted. That feels very strong. But in some ways, yes, that we take for granted, that we don't realize all of the life that it has lived, that plant has lived before us, you know? Cacao predates me by a couple of thousands of years and it has lived so many lives and has meant so many different things to different people and people my age during their time, and using it in so many, like, it's just wild to think about time and currency and value, plants and divinity, and that this plant was all those things all wrapped in one. So now we're gonna take a turn. I don't know if for the worst, you know, you be the judge. But we're gonna get into when the Spanish arrive, because that marked a whole new book, not even just chapter, presumably a whole new genre. When the colonizers arrive, and they come into a world that is not a new world to them, presumably, but not a new world in existence. The Aztecs, Central American, what we now know as Central America, and the other Americas already had complete systems, a spiritual system, economic, agricultural. But because it did not match what they understood, it was different, it was disorienting, they took what they wanted and destroyed the rest. And I will say, I think this is something that continues to happen, which is why I am such a strong advocate. And it's kind of scary, kind of nerve-wracking, because I'm not used to putting my ancestry, owning my ancestry, taking up space in that way in business, in this specific business also of cacao. Especially when I see other businesses that don't look like me, that are not black or brown, commodifying, talking about the ritual, the ceremony, the whatever of cacao. And so just wanted to make a note there that although we are talking about something that has happened, that doesn't mean that it stops happening. So all the codices, all the written records of the Aztecs were burned, and the ceremony around cacao was suppressed. The knowledge of how it was grown, prepared, offered was fractured deeply and interrupted. And this goes to me, this creates, I think, a direct line to me in that I am hoping to, with this business, with this new relationship, with me not necessarily, I don't think of it as commodifying. I do think of it of what I'm doing as a new relationship and bringing a new meaning, a new voice to the plant, to myself, via the plant, and that hopefully we can be in relationship, in community with you all, with each other, with ourselves, for a greater good, for our own divinity, for our own connection and our own sustainability and strength and nourishment. So I will say that not having a connection to my ancestors in a literal way, not having records, not having something to go back to, me even recording this helps me, and hopefully helps you all and all of us, as I said, create community relationship, to rebuild trust with this plant, trust with ourselves, trust within myself, and to fill this void of knowledge, of not knowing, of feeling lost. So, the people who held that knowledge, specifically the cacao knowledge, during the time of the Aztecs, were enslaved, were killed by the diseases the Spanish brought, and the population of Mesoamerica collapsed in the century, 100 years after initial contact. So we're talking about a loss of something like 90% of the indigenous population in parts of that region. So, for the context of everything that we're talking about, the journey so far, that happens to cacao around the year 1519. And the Spanish encounter cacao in Montezuma's court. He was the, I don't know the official title, but chief, the leader of the Aztecs. And the conquistador Cortés describes cacao in his letters home to Spain. And at first they're not into it because, again, it's different, it's disorienting, it's bitter, it's foreign. But as they keep messing with it and taking it apart and doing what they want to do with it, they add sugar, they add cinnamon, and then with heat and with a different process, it then becomes chocolate. So there is a record by 1544 that someone in the delegation of the Mayan, I'm going to mispronounce his name or their name, Quiche Maya, visiting the Spanish court, who brought gifts to the Spanish court, and one of them was cacao, prepared cacao. And that's one of the first documented introduction of chocolate to Europe. It was a delegation of Mayan people who were brought there partly as a political gesture, similar to, if those of you in the United States remember the Disney movie, or if you grew up watching the Disney movie, I should say, Pocahontas. And in both movies, I would say, the first and the second, although they're not historically accurate, but some pieces of the movie, of the story, they did get accurate, which is the piece about Pocahontas meeting with the British royal court when she went to London, and she did go to London, and she did marry John Rolfe. So there are always traces in history where the indigenous have to appease in some way the colonizer, the consumer, the capitalist, and I do mean that literally, someone capitalizing on their culture. And so just noticing that it's been a trend. And so the Spanish kept the drink. And they kept it for almost almost a century after that. And it became a luxury amongst the court. The Catholic monks at the time played a role in refining it, spreading the news about it. And then eventually all of Europe was obsessed and wanted chocolate, wanted cacao. So now we're going to go back to the word cacao because it changed. If you see the spelling, if you Google it, it comes up. Sure, you can spell cacao, C-A-C-A-O, but then you also get cocoa, C-O-C-O-A, which makes sense because as it was taken, the plant was taken by the Spanish, the word was also taken with it. And so in the Romantic languages, Portuguese, French, Italian, you start seeing the linguistic change a bit. And it gets wild to me that somewhere in the 1700s, the English speakers and scribes, they were writing down the word cacao, and they got it wrong, or they transcribed it, and so it ended up cocoa. But even the word cacahualt was changed into Spanish toward chocolate. So we can see pieces of the word still staying somewhere in there, but there's been, it's been morphed, it's been changed. So now we get into the next part of this saga of cacao, and that's chocolate. So once there's this big demand, capitalism, we have to meet that demand. We have to produce, and extract and consume. And in the 1500s, 1600s, how were we extracting? How were people extracting, if not through forced slavery, through forced labor? So when European demand for chocolate exploded, cacao plantations started to spread, first in the Americas. Then the Portuguese transplanted the trees to West Africa, beginning with Sao Tome in 1822. And then from those plantations, from the forced labor of the enslaved people, we started seeing chocolate. The Industrial Revolution brought us the chocolate bar, what we recognize today. I don't want to get too much into the slavery piece. I can do a whole other episode. I just want to get kind of the big higher level journey, not because it's not important, but I don't want to just I want to do it the grace, the justice that I would like to give it. But just suffice it to say that the new journey of cacao was all about extraction by those who are being extracted from, I don't know if I worded that right. The plant is being extracted, and at the same time, those who are extracting from the plant are being forced to do so because they are slaves. So it's just the layers of extraction. And what a 180 from a plant that was used, that not necessarily was used in the sense of extraction and exploitation, but it was in conversation. It was something beyond use. It was divine, and yes, it had its uses, but it was so much more than that. And then for whatever reason, this other culture, this other group of people felt that they had whatever authority to just extract and consume and corrupt the plant and the people, and used corrupted ways to fulfill their demands. So I think about this, which is why I want to do another episode on this, in what it looks like now in the 21st century to have any sort of business, but especially businesses, I think, that historically have already been extracted and corrupted to a certain extent. I mean, coffee, I don't even know that much about coffee, but that whole history of extraction and consumption and capitalism and capitalizing on just, I think all the words that start with C. The consumption, yeah. So, cacao for me is a blessing. It's a piece of ancestral veneration, piece of a connection to my ancestors on both sides, actually, both the Spanish and the indigenous side, for better or worse. And as a small batch maker with a small business. It's just me, one woman, one curly-haired petite woman, small tiny brand who really wants to do things sustainably. That's why the tin is, I say keep the tin, because I want you all to be able to get the refill, and I want you all to have the discount, so it's a bit of an incentive. But it's also so that you don't have to buy new things, new materials. I don't have to buy new materials. We don't have to extract more than we need from the earth, from ourselves, from each other. And it makes me reflect on a lot of the chocolate businesses, the other cacao businesses that maybe support in some ways. They throw a bone, so to speak, to the plantations of cacao that are in Central and South America to this day. But those individuals actually harvesting and having that relationship with the plant aren't on the front. They're not the faces. They're not really involved, let's say. It's just another model of extraction. And so I'm very sensitive. I'm very aware. I try to be as aware as I can, because this means so much to me. And it is a business. I want to be able to make a living, make an income, make meaning. But as you just heard me say, it's not just about making money. It's about meaning and purpose and culture and connection, relationship, community. So I am not outside the critique. I am definitely in it. I'm definitely a part of it. I definitely want to engage it respectfully, mindfully, holistically. And I do believe, I do feel, I am the Ancestry 23andMe and the other, I forget the other one I did, but my DNA proves that I am a descendant of the people whose histories are woven into this plant. And I want to say that again because I want to say it to myself. I am a descendant of the people whose histories are woven into this plant. My ancestry reaches into the places where cacao grew, the cultures that built their world into it, around it, because of it. But I didn't grow up with this. Not in the ceremonial sense, not in the deep embodiment, knowing sense. That transmission was interrupted for my family, the way it was interrupted for so many people from colonized lineages. You don't get a full picture. You don't get a picture. You get fragments, pieces, dreams, ideas, feelings. And then you spend your life trying to figure out what you're a descendant of, where your roots come from, what culture you're a part of, who are you? And I don't think reclaiming something that I fully understand, I think I will always be growing with it, in relationship to it, with it, for it. But I am in the process of returning to something with humility, with excitement, with joy, grace, and gratefulness. So I will leave you with this as I wrap up this episode. That the next time you hold something made with cacao, cacao, doesn't matter if it's a drink, a piece of chocolate, whatever form it's in for you, in front of you right now, take a second and just sit with, realize that it has traveled continents, oceans. It has traveled languages, changed its shape, form. It has been a phoenix of sorts to endure, sustain, strengthen, grow. And now it finds itself in your mouth, in your hand, in your purse, and all the things that had to happen, that has happened for you to be able to have it and embrace it, get nurturing and nourishment from it. Take a deep breath. If you feel called to, say thank you to the plant, to the chocolate, to the cacao. If you feel so called, say thank you to yourself for listening to all of this. I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being on this journey with me, with Cacao, for creating space for yourself to transform, whatever that looks like. And I will link everything that I've referenced below if you would like to see the show notes. If you would like to refill or get on the wait list if you're not international or in other states. I'm currently working on shipping, so please use the wait list in the meantime. Leave a comment, shoot me an email. This is about community and relationship and growth, and so I'd love to hear from you. If you want to go deeper, let me know what came up for you and what you would like to see, hear, feel. Find me here on Substack, on the podcast, other essays, and thank you so much. Please take care of yourselves. Be well. I'll talk to you all next time.